Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Shop Talk, hosted by the Triangle Area SQL Server Users Group. We are at the final Shop Talk of the year. There are no more Shop Talks for this year. There will be Shop Talks in the year 2022. But let's wind down the year. Howdy, Solomon. Let's wind down the year with a little bit of good news, and that is that the elections are over. In a stunning landslide, Mike and Tracy have been reelected to the board. And so, despite not voting for themselves, in spite of my nudging them to vote for themselves just to pad the total like an Iraqi vote. But aside from that, we do have some topics for tonight, and so I wanted to get into that. Let's do the really serious topic first, and then we'll get to the more lighthearted stuff. The really serious topic. Tomorrow, Mala's going to talk about script DOM for the main meeting. Our final main meeting of the year 2021. Actually, our final meeting of 2021. So then we will enter year 3 of March 2020. And we'll have yet another year of March 2020. But Mala will be talking about script DOM tomorrow. So tune in for that. If you haven't already, it's at meetup.com/trypass and register today, or just show up here tomorrow and, not register. That's also fine. We are good with that as well. So Mala, anything you want to...
more than 30 people registered, so I'm really looking forward to doing it.
Yeah. And I'd say there aren't too many talks on script DOM. There's not a huge amount of documentation or of community effort around it in the past, so it'll be good to see it in action.
Yes. I must let Arvind know. Sometimes he likes to get on and, really add valuable.
Yeah, Mala's talking about Arvind, who was the... Now, was he the original developer of script DOM, or is he the current maintainer?
No, it was developed from Gert Draper's team. Yeah.
Okay.
It fell on his plate to manage. He may have developed some of it. I don't think he did all of it. He may develop some of it, and he certainly has a strong attachment to it. and he tries to help whenever he can.
Yeah. Well, it's always a good sign for a product when Arvind does have a strong attachment to it, because that means you know that someone is going to have the answers.
Right.
I would pronounce his last name, but I've never been able to pronounce it correctly. It seems like the type of name that I should be able to pronounce, but whenever I say it, I think I say it, and then the word just comes out all wrong. But he won't.
Shyam Sundar is the right way to say it.
Shyam Sundar?
Shyam Sundar. Yeah, you're close. You're not doing too bad.
And so he'll never correct it either. It's like, just all right, that's good enough. It's close enough. I know who you're talking about. Just call me Arvind.
Yeah, it's a cultural thing. We're not given to correcting names as much as we should.
I get that.
Yeah.
So I have not even introduced our fine feathered friends here. To my right, not this right, but that right, Mala Mahadevan.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on a holiday
absolutely.
week. Yeah.
And to my down, Mike Christensen.
Hello. Welcome. Thanks for having me.
I mean, we always have you, so.
Thanks for continuing to. Sometimes I come home and I'm like, I tell my wife, "I'll welcome home," and she's like, "Wait a minute, you just came home. You're crazy."
So we've got one more topic of interest that is probably going to take us more than 3 minutes to talk about, and that is technical debt. So Mike wanted to talk a bit about technical debt, and I figured that out of fairness, he should try to describe it for the audience, and then we'll tear apart that definition. No stress, no pressure.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. So this came up in the context of two things came up for this topic. So one is that I kind of am I've been thinking about it a lot because a lot of the people in our group have a shop that has like different stages of development, and I'm kind of a one-man show at this point. I'm kind of the main developer for my particular project, so I'm trying to think about how I can make things sustainable and not try to overcommit myself to things and also make things high quality. At the same time, I came across an engineering IEEE software engineering radio program, which was really geared towards me. It was kind of like the missing manual between um, getting out of school and in computer science and working at a corporation. And for me, it's more like a career changer. So the context was, people come out of computer science school and then they've built projects and they've done this, but they've never maybe worked on a project that has 20 people working on it, and it's been something that's been in production for 10 years and has millions of users and a huge code base. And so one of the things they talk about is technical debt that these authors brought up, and they talked about I forget the name of the person, but a famous computer science blogger of some sort who brought up this matrix of what were the two words that it was
It's Martin Fowler, and he's talking about
Fowler, yeah,
reckless and prudent
right,
decision making, and then deliberate and inadvertent decision making.
Right, exactly. And I think we struggle with this in our shop, and it's something that sometimes we create an enormous amount of technical debt. You want to create something quickly and get something done, but is it sustainable? As another developer, can they come in and see what we're doing? And I've kind of always in my career have shied towards like get it done, get it out the door, and I've been recently converted, and this is what we can discuss, is putting in X percent of extra effort to document your code, write your code, and kind of not necessarily always ANSI, but very legibly, and then refactor your code and make sure your code makes sense to someone else so that somebody comes behind you, they can read it. So it's something I spend a ton of time talking about, and I love getting people's thoughts on how they manage technical debt, because I see a lot of projects fail where you spend all this time on it and then it never goes anywhere, and it or something gets created, it's really cool, but consultants that are highly paid roll off and no one knows how to continue it.
Yeah. So, framing the idea of technical debt, I think there are a couple of different definitions, and what definition you take really colors how you look at the concept. There are some neutral connotations of things like legacy code, where legacy code is code that I inherited, and or it's older code. Yeah, it's been around for 15 years and I need to maintain it. That's not necessarily a negative connotation, but typically we think of the concept of technical debt, like the word debt in there. Debt is almost always considered a bad thing. It's not always a bad thing, but usually if you're in debt, you've got some issues that you have to work out. And if you're in technical debt, well, the connotation there is, well, I've got technical issues that I need to work out. Quite often we think of technical debt as there is this old code that's kind of rotten. It's not well maintained, and we need to fix this because things fail at odd times of the day, or we're on old unpatched systems that are at risk of being exploited, or we've got some code that's stuck on an obsolete platform. We have to use SQL Server 2008 because the vendor went bankrupt in 2011, and so we're not certified to run on anything newer. We're not allowed to run it on anything newer. Like, we're just some weird scenario where, we have to do it in this way. Alternatively, it's we choose to do it in this way because we have decided that the amount of effort necessary to make this thing better is not sufficient given the time that we have and the opportunity cost of fixing it. And this is where you get into bringing technical debt back into a more neutral concept, where from a developer standpoint, I think we are very much anti-tech debt on principle. If I see something that I don't like, I want to fix it. If I think this thing is broken, I want to fix it. And from our perspective, give me the time to fix it. From the business side, the problem is that's allocating resources into something that doesn't necessarily have a tangible benefit, may not even have a benefit. This is where we get into a little bit of the riskiness of how do we define technical debt? If it is simply there is some code that I think we could make faster, but we took this and have it be acceptably fast, knowing that there are things we could do to make it faster. That can be considered technical debt on the database side, and the business unit may say it's just not relevant to us today. This code works well enough. It may be unnecessarily complex, but if it works well enough, we'd rather have people spend time on things that will earn the company money as opposed to make the developers' lives marginally happier. There's an inflection point where, okay, if you're able to show the business that there is in fact value out of this, let's say there is a really complex system that I could scrap and replace in a week and will be considerably easier, and we're spending a lot of maintenance hours on it. Now we have the beginnings of a business case. Or if you're in the cloud and you say, we're spending $10,000 a month on infrastructure because these prior decisions that we've made lead to needing to have overpowered servers. And I could cut our bill by $10,000 a month if I do this thing. And at that case, now you have a really clear business case, because you say, okay, here's the ongoing stream of $10,000 per month in expenditures, and here's the cost of making this change, and here's the probability that the developer making the change is actually correct. That's a factor that we don't always think about. And that gives you what is the net present value of that stream of future expenses versus the expenditure today, and do we have a good return on investment? If we do, great, let's fix this thing. We don't always have that, though. In a lot of cases, the reason that technical debt tends to persist is, as developers, we have a very crude way of explaining value to an end customer. And in many cases, we have a mechanistic approach that doesn't directly translate to a value-based approach. We can say this will increase performance by 11%, even though we're typically never that precise. This will increase performance by something. Okay, will that sell more of this product? Well, maybe. Maybe. Maybe is the right answer. But maybe is a doubtful maybe, not a probably. Solomon says, legacy, old, maybe inconvenient. Tech debt is risky due to security or cost of maintaining dead code, or might cause future updates to be more costly and time-consuming than what's being saved now, or the other things that I mentioned. Yeah, and it's important to think about what it is, and then I want to drive into how we get there and why it can be rational to accept tech debt and to have tech debt and to continue having tech debt. Technical debt essentially is, there is something that I as a developer want to be able to do, and at the time I realized that I needed to do it a more expedient way, or I simply did not understand that there was a better approach, And now there is a better approach. I mean, this could be something like a version update. Oh, well, we built this thing in SQL Server 2008 R2. We're on 2019 right now. So all of those uses of 4XML path, I could replace that with string ag. Or there are cases where we had to use cursors to build certain things that could be replaced with window functions. So it's not necessarily your developer done screwed up someplace. It is more that there is a better approach as of right now. So Solomon says you don't necessarily pay for legacy code, but you do for tech debt. I'm not sure you even necessarily pay for tech debt. And I think that's one of the it's I guess the separating equilibrium between if it's valuable enough technical debt to fix versus something that you just shrug and say whatever. So as an example of this, I may have queries that could technically be, they could run faster. I may have a data structure, database schema that is not optimal, that requires some additional development time, but not a huge amount. And where the cost of making that fix is considerably larger than the benefit I get from it. Like if I have a query that takes 2 seconds to run and I could get it down to 1/10 of a second, hey, that's really good. But if it only runs twice a day and it's not a critical query that needs to run in 1/10 of a second, if like it could run in 3 or 4 seconds and nobody would care, that is technical debt, but it's not positive return on investment. And that's the kind of technical debt that that we say probably shouldn't be fixed. It's there, but unless you have your opportunity cost is something that's even worse, it's not worth it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And we're trying to do this Azure native, like Fire implementation, and we've been doing a lot of experimentation, etc. And we're not necessarily finding that the solution is better than the multi-platform solution that we have now, which is SQL Server, Oracle, EHR from Epic, and other custom tools to kind of creating this massive Firestore. So it's fascinating because once you create it and you forked Happy Fire or what have you, like how do you maintain that? It's not an easy decision sometimes.
Yeah. So Solomon does say there is still a cost though in your examples, but it's worth the cost in those cases. And I would specify in some cases. You can accept having debt. That was a cat right there. Yeah, just like with finances. And so Solomon's getting to where I really want to go with this because I am purposefully playing a bit of devil's advocate as, you know, from the mindset of developers, our automatic instinct is, I hate this, and whether it's a minor inconvenience or a major systemic failure, I want to change it. I want to fix it. And whether the fix is better than the original problem, well, that's a different story. That's a modifier on your return on investment calculation. But it's rare that from the developer side, there is anybody who really argues, hold your horses a little bit. Now, Jeff Moden in chat, howdy, Jeff, says, I'm in an environment where that type of thing was always done, and now we're suffering death of a million cuts. Yeah, and I also do want to say, hey, there are important cases where we do want to fix technical debt, and that's where you do have this concept of return on investment. And if the better that you can define what that ROI looks like, the better off life is. And the easier it is for a business person to understand that there is a practical benefit. Like if we're able to say, by spending this week on development work and fixing a lot of these problems that we've just layered on over the years, or if we spend 2 weeks or even a month, but that the return on investment is development is now 15% faster forever, that could quite easily pay for itself. And that's kind of the internal calculus that I think we have to play. That's the same scam that modern video games use, microtransactions. Death by a million cuts, yeah. Death by a million 99-cent payments. They're all just so easy. So it is something I want to put into, if not direct financial terms, at the very least conceptual financial terms. So we have nightly runs that are bleeding into the day, and there's now no easy fix because all of the code has a major performance problem. Their idea is to move to the cloud so we can throw more hardware at it, or at least more money at it. The problem is the code is all running single-threaded because it was written so poorly. Right, and so that's getting into a case where, okay, there's a very credible case for this is why we need to fix it. Here is what it's costing you. And if they look at cloud pricing, that makes the dollar amount so much clearer. Job security, plenty to fix. Wow, Mike's got a co-pilot tonight who's taking ownership of the laptop. And so you have this case where, all right, I can tell you this is how much money it's going to cost you by going down this road. And we could save however much percent of that money. That's where it can get a lot easier to fix technical debt. But in many cases, yeah, it's better not to have it at all. And then you don't have to worry about it. But that's kind of like saying, it's better never to get hurt. Just better to be healthy all your life. True, but not always something you can avoid. Not always something you can necessarily do. There are cases where, hey, I designed this thing well for the time, for the circumstances, to fit the needs of the customer, but then those needs changed, those circumstances changed, and now this code that used to be good is no longer that good. Or I was an idiot, inexperienced developer who completely bamboozled my way into a company umpteen years ago, and now that I'm more competent, I can look back at previous me and say, "Oh boy, let's change some of that." My major problem is they don't believe the cloud method will run single-threaded, even though I've demonstrated it with execution plans and the like. They're going to spend a shed load of money. I actually was going to try to balderdize that, but it looks like you already did. A shed load of money to find out they're still wrong. Yeah. That is unfortunate. That's kind of...
I remember that shed load, that term.
It's a good term. It's a good balderization.
Right.
And yeah, that is pretty unfortunate. At some point, somebody high up enough is going... Either it works well enough and people just kind of forget about it. They accept it as the cost of doing business, or somebody high up falls on a sword over it. And that's really unfortunate when you can look at it and say, let me take a hack at this because we can fix it. Now the question becomes, how much effort does it take to fix it? And what's the probability that the fix will be better than the cause? And that's not always clear, especially up front. You may get into a project where, okay, we're going to fix Giganto system, and we think we can fix it. And then you get 4 months in and you find out that a lot of the things that are broken are actually broken for a reason. That's where in the technical debt world, we as developers who weren't necessarily there at the time and are looking at it afterwards may classify something as, this is rotten code. This is debt that I need to fix, that I need to maintain. And then we get to the point where we're in the middle of development and find out why all of those things were put in place. That, oh, this customer sends files in differently. Oh, this customer assumes that all tildes are actually kill statements. And this customer assumes that anything not a tilde is a kill statement. And this customer on some days does this thing and on other days does another thing. And this customer doesn't understand how to upload files correctly. And so all of these weird exceptions are put in place. All of these complexities are added in, which leads to a much worse outcome. And combine that with the fact that development tends to be iterative and a story of uncertainty. Meaning, when we start developing things, we have very little understanding of what the future is going to hold. We have very little understanding of whether or not the things that we're developing are actually going to be relevant. And that can lead us to a case where we develop a thing that we think is correct. 2 years down the line, significant changes are necessary because either those circumstances changed, or the people gave us wrong requirements, or we misunderstood those requirements. And you tend to have systems that are like patchworks of one-off requirements changes, which is how you end up with a legacy system that ends up being a cesspool. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink unless you tape a hose to their mouth. That's the phrase. That's the saying I've heard.
The Azure hose feature. Can I ask a mini question related to this?
For sure. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep ranting.
Well, so if you think about technical debt at a micro level when you're doing your day-to-day work, do you both, or anybody in the chat, stop and catalog things sometimes? So, for example, I know you blog both of you, but if you came up with a clever way to calculate someone's age or handle UTC dates or something like that, do you kind of stop and say, oh, I'm going to do some personal knowledge management, or I'm going to stop and write this up or put this somewhere for a future talk? Or how do you spend time on things like that?
I write it up to look into later, and if it's a work situation, I make a ticket for it. I leave it up to my boss to prioritize that ticket based on what he thinks is important, and he has really good understanding of how important tech debt is. Thankfully, but I've worked with other people who are not that way. Either way, if it's documented, if I put it down somewhere, then I feel my responsibility is done. Like, I've done what I can to let the business know, hey, there's a problem here and you need to take time to fix, or this is going to keep snowballing. So that's what I do, is make a ticket out of it and create an awareness that it exists.
Yeah, and on my side, yes, there's some of that documentation. There's some of that that case where, all right, I'm going to take note of things that I've done in the past, because 2 years from now I'm going to forget and try to remember what was it that I did. Now, getting to Jeff's comment, the only way to fix a system in that case is fix it on the side and demonstrate. Potentially, yeah. If a company is not willing to put in that time. Now, I've worked on product teams where our tech leads have said, we're going to have 10% or 20% of sprint time be tech debt, that The business person doesn't get these days. We get those days. And that way, even if it's hard to determine return on investment, there is still that capability. There is still at least some basic time where we're able to fix things without having to do it in spare time. And there is always the canard of your developer available time, where you're not running this at your focus factor. You're not running at 100% on sprint work. You're going to be in meetings. You're going to have downtime. You're going to have hours of the day where you're sitting around surfing the internet looking like you're working. It's good to have that factor into your dev time. Just don't tell people directly. I'm kidding mostly. I think I'm kidding mostly. So, I guess what I would say on that regard, correction, the business person gets the time in both cases. In tech debt time, they just don't understand what they're gaining. That is fair. That is fair. This is a good point. As long as you have that return on investment. Now, with the idea of you're going to get a certain percentage of time, the idea is, okay, we won't be able to clarify what that ROI looks like, but as long as you have enough trust in that developer team, it's going to be, it's going to work out well enough for you in the end, and it will make things easier for you later on. So you're right, Solomon. That is still beneficial to the business side in the long run, and even if it is difficult to negotiate directly, define directly what that ROI looks like. So sometimes you just got to take the time. And the other thing is, once a company actually has realized they have a problem, they need to realize that they need a full-time developer or developers to fix it. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now that gets us to a trickier question. And by the way, Jeff, I just sent you the link to pop into video here if you want to hop on. The ironic problem is the developer team that caused the problem, and now you're going to ask them to fix it. Sounds like the mouse guarding the cheese. Maybe. That, like, I could say that hey, I've been working on this project for a few years. But at the same time, if I've learned new things, or if we made that choice because of extant business circumstances, as long as I understand what I could do better to improve this, I might argue that wasn't the same me. Now, if it's people who have 20 years in the business, by which I mean 1 year of experience 20 times, then yeah, you're right. Those people are probably not going to do a better job this time around. And at that point, you might need someone else. But somebody new may come in, introduce new types of technical debt because they don't understand the complexities of systems, especially the types of systems that you need to untangle in order to make something better. And that Gordian knot, so to speak. And sometimes Alexander's method isn't the best for untying the Gordian knot. Occasionally it is.
Absolutely, yeah.
Occasionally you just cut it, you just get rid of it, burn it to the ground, nuke it from orbit. It's the only way to be sure.
Right.
But
the Gordian Docker container.
Yeah, exactly. But in many cases, having that business experience, having that detailed case knowledge, if you're willing, if you understand this project is not my baby, that old code is not my baby, it is okay to change it. It is okay. It is ugly. If you have a person who's not willing to say, yeah, this code is ugly, here are things that could be better, where ugly could just mean there's a better way to do it now. But ugly could also mean we used SQL variant for all of our column types because back when the original development team came in and put this together, they thought SQL variant was a really good idea. We fired all those people a decade ago, but just haven't gotten around to fixing the code. And this leads to another problem, which is there's usually a lot of dependency management that you have to do that the database side is conceptually pretty easy to fix. All right, I can recreate these tables, create a more sane schema. I can take advantage of appropriate normalization techniques. I can take advantage of query efficiencies, but the application is expecting things in this particular manner, and the more tightly integrated the application is with the database, the tougher it is to manage. Like I do some consulting with one client who has different versions of a product that all access the same database. It's a cloud-based database system, but some of the versions of the product are on premises, and so there are customers who are 4 or 5 versions old. They refuse to upgrade, and still they're paying customers. They're regularly paying, and as a result, they're like, well, we can't make database changes because these old versions of the code are still out there, and they need to continue to work. So the types of changes you can make are kind of limited. That's another consideration that we've got to keep in mind. But assuming you can get past that, and sometimes it may take doing it on your own. It may take a little bit of wildcat development, especially if you have people around you who do trust you enough. Like, this is the type of thing where if a person came in and they were 2 months on the job and pretty new to programming, and they said, I'm going to go change all this stuff, I would probably say, let's take a step back. Let's talk about it for a bit first. They may have good ideas. They may be on the right track, but it may not be the best choice. And let's let Mr. Jeff Moden in.
Hi, kids.
Hey, Jeff.
Long time no see.
It has been a minute. Good to have you on here.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
I promise not to be a sailor.
As long as they're all euphemisms and things that could pass in 1890s England, I think we're going to be good. So you could use all the swear words that nobody knows about anymore, and they'd fly right across, like in the Avengers.
Avengers is a swear word.
Loki in the Avengers movie used a swear word that was very vulgar about 130 years ago, but pretty much nobody born in the 1900s would know that was a word. And so when he used it, it's like, oh my, I'm surprised that got past the censors.
How old are you, Kevin? 300?
Let's talk about technical debt. No.
He's immortal.
I don't know about anybody else, but when God said, let there be light, he threw the switch.
God said, let there be, Kevin. I'm positive God said that.
And then never said it again. Like, nope. Speaking of technical debt.
Yeah, this is actually very interesting to me because, like I said, I am fighting the problem of a death by 1,000 cuts, and we have all sorts of nightly runs that are bleeding over into the day because everybody said, well, they run it at night. Who cares how long they take? Yeah, okay. Yeah. When I joined the company 10 years ago, their largest database was 65 gigabytes. I have non-clustered indexes on static lookup tables that big now.
Right. Well, yeah, there is right there a case where there is a new circumstance, and that new circumstance does require some additional development effort. It requires some work be done. And this is kind of the other part of debt that I want us to think about, where in the accounting sense, debt is not necessarily a bad thing, but it is something that you pay an ongoing basis. So, you have this concept of I'm going to, I have debts and I have to finance those debts. I can take them on. Like I have a credit card. I pay for most things with a credit card. Those are debts that I take on, but I take them on with the expectation that I'm going to pay it off. And if you're willing to pay it off on a regular basis, you don't end up accruing that mountain of debt that causes you to go eventually into tech bankruptcy, which is burn down this project because it's a complete failure.
Well, and that's what I'm fighting right now is they've got this AWS bug in their ear. And the consultants that they hired on the AWS side are going, oh, yeah, we can solve that. Oh, yeah, we can solve that. And they introduced them into technologies. Like one of the technologies that my boss was raving about for about 4 months was Redshift. And it turns out that Redshift doesn't solve the problem. One of the problems that they're having is, he says, well, Jeff, you're the only one that we have that really understands set-based programming. Okay. What do you think Redshift is? It's the ultimate in set-based programming. And besides that, Redshift isn't going to do what you want to do. You're trying to do a ton of data validation from external sources. And, while a lot of people think they can do it that way, apparently the people that we're talking about couldn't do it. And so they spent a ton of money on the wrong thing based on what they know instead of listening to the one person. Everybody else was saying, yeah, this is going to work. And I'm going, no, it's not going to work. And no, shifting all your stuff to Aurora is not going to solve it for you. You'll need to invest some money. I don't care if the SQL Server is up on EC2 on AWS. You're still going to have to spend some money on fixing you want. And if you buy something that's off the shelf, you're going to run into the technical debt of something off the shelf is written to solve the problems of the world, including world hunger and climate change and everything else, but it's not going to help you very much with your particular problem. And there's also a learning curve there, and it's better to suffer a learning curve about stuff that you've written than trying to it's like trying to use a shoehorn for a tire stop while you're replacing your tires. It just isn't going to do the job very well. So, boy, I cleaned that one up, I got to tell you.
Right. Yeah. On the topic of Redshift, you do have this idea. Hey, Redshift is a warehouse. It's a massive parallel processing warehouse. If you're not doing warehousing style queries where you're aggregating very large amounts of data, then it is a really, really expensive way of accessing data. And if you're trying to do things with validation, this is like having column store indexes in SQL Server, where I'm not going to put text values, a lot of text into there. You don't want to put a lot of text into Redshift. It's not really well designed for that. It's really well designed for, I have 2 trillion rows of measures data, and I need to write queries that aggregate it by arbitrary time frames.
This reminds me,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I had some colleagues at an unnamed company where the silver bullet was Vault or Data Vault. You heard of that?
We
And
also
then it ended up being a terrible mistake. It wasn't implemented well, and it's held together with sticks of gum, and they're going to Snowflake now, which they're having a good experience with. But yeah, it's the challenge when you're in a situation, Jeff, like yours, where it seems like
well,
the
and
solution will
to,
solve it, but it won't necessarily, and people aren't really listening.
right. One of the things that I've always been told, and you've all heard it before, Jeff, just because you can do something in SQL Server doesn't mean you should. And I'm going, okay, just because you can do something in the Tower of Babel that you're trying to create also doesn't mean you should. And then they go, well, Jeff, SQL Server is not the center of the universe. And I look at them just as I start to walk to the server room and say, cool, let's turn it off and find out if you're right. The real fact is that the data that they're using is perfect for relational databases, even without column store, and they can fix it. And I can show them how to fix it, and I've actually done it several times. For example, a simple merge between existing data and new data. We have 2.2 million rows worth of loan information that's sitting in a file. And I finally convinced them that using bulk insert isn't the great evil that they think it is. And we finally got to that, and I finally convinced them to stop using cursors and while loops to process things row by row, and convinced them to do things by columns. And it works good. We're doing a lot better, but they do things one column at a time. And I showed them in the merge, hey, let me show you this little trick with hash bytes. And, very quickly, as you well know, if the hash bytes are not the same, it's guaranteed that the data is not the same. But if they are the same, it's still not guaranteed that the data is the same. But you can very quickly eliminate, there's that word again, a shed load of processing, get 2.2 million rows down to 10,000 rows that you actually need to do some processing on. And their example was taking, I want to say 25 minutes just to get the staging table loaded up with what's different. And I got it down to something like, including the amount of time to actually go out and find the file. I think it was 800 milliseconds that I had gotten it down to. That's worth something, and yet they're still not doing that. And so it's a very, very hard thing to say, I've shown you the solution, why aren't you using it? And the answer is frequently because, and to your point, Kevin, because we don't have time. And I'm going, you keep saying you have to show them the ROI. And it's very difficult to show them the ROI of things where everybody knows the cost of everything and the value of nothing. And I realize it's a tired old saying, but oh my God, if you shave 25 minutes off, we have 1,000 clients. And if you shave 25 minutes off the nightly runs for 1,000 clients, oh my God, you are suddenly talking about real processing power. And that might take us out of the let's fall into the next day type processing. But no, let's try AWS. So there it is.
Right. Ironically, in AWS, it probably would be easier to make the sale because, well, by doing this, we could reduce the size by this, which is this many dollars per month.
Well, I could also tell them, look, it's actually going to go parallel now.
Right. But I suppose this is going with the analogy of technical debt and credit cards. What you're describing is I spent $600,000 on a gender study PhD. That's kind of where we're going. That's the big boat of technical debt, where you got to hack away at that, but there is a lot, it sounds like. And when people are so resistant to it, yeah, that makes life even more difficult. And I've been at companies where that has been the case, and generally it's past tense have been at, because if people within a company are amenable to it, then all right, let's make it better. If not, there just comes a point where there's only so much I can do. I have told you, here is the path forward. You have decided not to go down that path, and I can accept that. You have that decision to make, but don't complain to me when the thing fails, because I'm telling you, here's the thing to do, and you won't do it. So
Right.
you have accepted the alternative,
Right.
which is usually
My
not
favorite
something
thing
people
is
like
I
to hear.
get an email in the morning saying, Jeff, there's something going wrong in the server. Can you see what it is? Because everything seems slow. And my answer back to him is, yes, you're correct. It's doing just exactly what I told you it was going to do. And they
Yep.
still haven't really hit on that yet. And the other big problem, and I'm sure all three of you and virtually everyone in the audience is aware of, is frequently the people that know how to fix it are a voice of one. And
Amen.
you have to, as
Fully
you said,
agree.
there's, yeah,
Yeah.
as you said, there's all these people that are doing their ring knocking thing. Well, in my 20 years of experience, okay, it was only 1 year at a time, as you say, but you have 20 people standing around there going, well, in my humble opinion, or this humble opinion, or whatever, and I'm going, I wish your opinion was a little bit more humble, because you're wrong. And I've shown it to you several times. Well, that's just one instance. Yeah, but it fixes 1,000 customers. And I don't know how to handle it other than to do what you suggest is, okay, I'm going to make this past tense.
Right.
I'm sorry, that came out loud, didn't it?
Yeah, that's tricky. It's a really tricky situation at that point. And Solomon says you should respond with for that early morning message of, hey, this thing is running slow. Yes, it's doing exactly what it's designed to do.
Exactly. And that's pretty much what I do. Yep, it's that same old problem. You'll just have to wait for it. Well, can't you add an index to it or something? Yeah, I've tried it, but yes, that's part of it. And I can add some indexes, but again, it's the system that also takes a lot of inserts, and so you got to be careful there. And indexes don't fix non-sargeable code either. And
oh, amen, Jeff. Indexes don't fix non-sargable code.
right.
Yes.
At least you're pronouncing it right, Mala. I appreciate that.
We had a whole
I
discussion on a
have
prior
enough
episode
people
about
to correct me if I don't.
No.
So we had a whole discussion in the past about whether it's sargable or sargeable, and I am all sargeable all the time.
Yeah, me too.
Sarge.
Mala and I are in the SARD category. That's how my brain says it when I see it.
Well, I say sargeable partially because of the innuendo there. In order to fix it, you need to become militaristic about how to do the fix, because there's really only one or two ways to fix it, and they both result in it no longer being non-sargeable or non-sargable. It's like people say the correct pronunciation for good is GUID, and No, I'm not going there. I've been saying good since before your daddy was programming. I'm not changing now.
See, I just like to imagine a little R. Lee Ermey in the database optimizer is all.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, so it's a very real problem. I like I say, a death by 1,000 cuts. How do you fix that? You have to fix every cut. You can't. There is no stab wound that you can suture up. It's all these little tiny 1,000 cuts and missing ribs here and there, and companies just don't want to invest in it. And they also think, well, SQL Server is obviously the wrong tool. No, it's not. It's exactly the right tool. You just need to learn how to use it. Well, we don't have time to do it. Okay, you have time to
The same problem.
learn that Redshift isn't your right tool over a 4-month period. If you spent that much time learning how to use SQL Server correctly, you wouldn't even be thinking about moving somewhere else. So it's a hard sell, and I agree. And thank you for letting me come on the mic, by the way.
Of course. So we're going to wrap things up in just a couple of minutes, but I guess I would say for that death by 1,000 cut style of technical debt, even for major types of tech debt, having people in the organization who can be those advocates for fixing things, it goes a long way. Having people who are willing to make the changes, who are willing to get things done, it's that there's no substitute for that. And if you're in a case where you know that there is the right solution, you know that this is the right answer, and nobody else is going to go down that road, yeah, you're probably not going to make a lot of headway, because you'll fix some of those problems, but then 10 new problems will come in, and those are just I think that's a cultural issue more than the type of thing that could be fixed with one person putting in some effort.
Well, and the other thing is, even if you have an army of advocates with you, if the upper levels of management don't buy into it,
Amen.
you're still dead.
Yes.
And there's nothing you can do to change that.
Mm-hmm.
You can do. There's some wildcat development ability. Like, oh, well, it's going to take me 4 days to do this assignment, and I know that really it's 2 days plus 2 days of tech debt that I'm sneaking in.
Yeah, I've done that to try to help.
You got to do that,
because I like the people that the rest of the people in the company, and I don't want to see them have to hit the street because of a company crashing and burning from just overwhelming tech debt. But you can only do so much of that, and
right.
If you get caught, you're the one that gets fired, and then you can make even less of a difference.
True.
And so it's a really sad issue, and I wish there was an easy answer where somebody will go, oh, you just showed me that you retook something that took 25 minutes down to 800 milliseconds. Let's do that.
Yeah, that's the ideal world, at least. But all right, we are going to wrap up for this year.
So, Kevin, I have a request. I just noticed that my talk starts at 6:30 tomorrow. Is there a chance we can start at 6? Or do you think it's too late to change?
Let's talk about that. It may be too late. I don't want to have all the people who signed up expecting 6:30 and then...
No, that's fine. I was just thinking because it's a long talk. Okay, no problem.
And one other thing, stop using reorganize.
Good call, Jeff. All right.
Very generally good advice. All right. So on that note, stop using reorganize, and we will see you maybe tomorrow. If not, hopefully in the new year. Everybody, have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, guys. Good night.
Bye.